Good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Pilla. I am the co-chair of the Board of Deacons, and I'll be leading the service today with the lovely and talented Reverend Dr. Cheryl Dudley, one of our own members. We are standing in for Susan Sparks and BJ Hutto, who are both out of town. This week marks the first week that Susan will be on her 12-week sabbatical, so we wish her well. And this week also, Reverend Hutto is away on a 2-week trip to Israel. So we will be your leads today, and we hope you enjoy the service. We also want to send a very special welcome and shout out to our live streaming audience who's watching us online, so welcome. And we have a number of things going on that we want to let everyone be aware of. First and foremost, next week we also have a substitute for BJ. Her name is Arlene Wells, and she is a colleague of his, and it's the first time she'll be here preaching, so we hope everyone can join us again for that. And we want to thank everyone for making it through this crazy day. I understand there's a bike trek thing going on, making everyone very, very late. But we have a couple of things coming up that we want to let everyone know about. The first is Beer and Bible. Kevin, do you want to come talk about that, or do you want me to do it? You'll do it? Great.
Good morning, everyone. So the first of several invitations, because it's not this coming week, but the week after this. Thursday, I believe the date is May 18th. We will have our May edition of Beer and Bible. It will be hosted by Frida Lane in her home. Thank you for that. And we'll start at 6:30. We're thinking about a theme related to Proverbs, so we'll let you know later what that is. But it's a great time for fun and fellowship. We'll have a theme, we'll have an open discussion, and hope you can make it. I'll make this announcement again next week, and we'll get a clear list of how many people will be joining. Thanks.
Great. Also in the bulletin, you'll see on May 21st, we're planning a dinner shift at the Bowery Mission. So if anyone wants to participate in that, please, you can sign up with me or with Jackie in the back or with Adam Crew next week. And a little update, we had a new members meeting last week, and it was really a wonderful conversation, and we've welcomed about 7 new members. We'll officially have our right-handed fellowship for that on May 21st during service as well. So do we have any other announcements, perhaps? No? Okay, well then, as is customary, I'd like to offer you all the sign of the peace, and we... what am I supposed to say? I didn't write this part down. So now we all join in wishing each other peace be with you.
Sing praise to God who reigns above, the God of all creation, the God of power, the God of love, the God of our salvation. With healing balm my soul is filled, and every faithless murmur stilled, to God all praise and glory.
Our call to worship this morning comes from Isaiah 40, verses 1 through 5. Comfort, O comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that she has served her term, that her penalty is paid, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries out, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway of your God, for your God. Every valley shall be lifted, every mountain and hill shall be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. Then the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all people shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken." Our first hymn today is number 261, Sweet, Sweet Spirit. We're going to sing it twice. Please stand if you are able. Thank you. And now we come to our time of morning prayer. If you all please bow with me. Dear Lord, first I'd like to personally thank Susan Sparks and Reverend Hutto for entrusting Reverend Dudley and myself with the congregation and the service today. We are blessed to have their trust and support of our MIBC family. Many of us come here in prayer with heavy hearts and burdens on our minds. We look to you for support, guidance, and comfort. Many of us here find ourselves in need, whether we are in crisis due to physical condition, a romantic heart, or mental faculties in stress. We know that we can turn to you for guidance to make better decisions, find solace in our nervous tendencies, and the light to succeed. More and more, these days seem filled with uncertainty as our leaders shift, our views collide, and sometimes tensions flare among loved ones and friends. We ask that you guide us as we navigate these days. Help us to find the energy to always do what is right. Give us the belief that we can do better. Shine your light on us so that we can live in your image. Help us to be the best we can be, and help us now as we raise our personal prayers for our congregation and our loved ones. Special prayers are asked for Molly Chan and her family as she undergoes surgery, and a special prayer of gratitude for successful medical results this week for Susan Sparks. Prayers for Brian Krausen and his family, and his Cho and her mother. Prayers for Faith Grill and Tom Grill. Now we conclude our morning prayer with the words taught to us by your Son. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Our next hymn is Savior, Like a Shepherd Lead Us, number 558. Please stand if you're able.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to be home. Our scripture for this morning comes from the first book of the Bible, Genesis. Familiar passage about one of the patriarchs of the faith, Noah. Beginning with the 7th chapter, verses 1 through 6. Hear the word of God. The Lord then said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate. And also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now, I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made." And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came on the earth. And then 2 verses from other places. From the 6th chapter of Genesis, the 8th verse. It says, "Noah found grace in the sight of the Lord." And then from Psalm 37, verses 25 and 26. "I was young, and now I am old. Yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging bread. They are always generous and lend freely." Won't you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Before I begin, let me just say a word of thanks to the Reverend Susan Sparks, our dear pastor and our friend, who is away on sabbatical. May God bless her as she gets some much-needed rest and is recovering from a procedure. So even though she is not in this place, she is in our hearts. And we will accompany her and pray for her as she is away from us. On Easter Sunday, a band of brothers was honored in a special tribute concert. The concert was called "Staying Alive," a Grammy tribute to the music of the Bee Gees, or the Brothers Gibb. They have sold over 220 million records since making them, being one of the top-selling artists of all time, surpassed only by Elvis, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, Garth Brooks, and Paul McCartney. The Bee Gees' signature song, "Staying Alive," shot to number 1 in 1978 upon its release from the Saturday Night Live album. Some of you might remember. The Easter Sunday night concert was a montage of Bee Gees songs sung by a constellation of now current popular artists who sang their songs to the remaining Bee Gees. And then after they had sung, Barry got up and sang himself. This special concert boosted the network's ratings, and it landed CBS the coveted position of the most watched channel on Easter Sunday night. Barry Gibb, reflecting on the Bee Gees' music, and his brother said, "Everyone has a destiny and a legacy. Theirs was singing together."
Somebody help me. Somebody help me, yeah. I'm saying alive.
Sometimes it's about staying alive. But other times it's about the stay in our lives. Those things that will remain after we're gone, how we will be remembered, our legacy, as some say. I was very captured by that old story about Noah. And I read it over and over again, and I changed my mind about whether or not I wanted to go there around Noah, and the Lord brought me back to this story. It's a fantastic epic. His being called and assigned by God, being recognized first as having extraordinary virtue, so much virtue that he was the only one that God said that he would save along with his family. And he was faithful and obedient, and to the best of his ability, he fulfilled God's wishes. When a great flood came and its aftermath, he learned how to stay alive. Yet the 5 words that grabbed me most, which I read earlier, were Noah was 600 years old. He was 600 years old when the floods came. And if we read further, we find that he was 601 years old when the flood waters subsided. Now, I think you would agree with me that being 600 years old doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us in this time and age. It's way outside of our range of understanding of the span of human life. We don't know how they counted years then. Yet, even if they counted it differently, I'm certain that he was of advanced age. Yet, it is at this advanced age when Noah's life and the whole world changed. Since 600 years is outside of our understanding of life, even the idea of death seems almost remote, I think, until God told him that God had chosen him to live. And it would not be a life that he had known before. And it wasn't the end of his life. But at 600 years, his life would be forever changed. It was a culminating point of his life when all the virtue that he had exhibited up to that point made him the candidate for a greater work. In 600 years, I am sure that he had established some patterns in his life, some predictabilities. He got up in the morning, made some breakfast, ate it with his family, lived virtuously, prayed, and went on with his life. But at 600 years old, the predictable patterns were over. The oldest person I've ever known was my great-grandmother. We called her Mama Rachel Bell. Mama Rachel. She lived to be 108 years old. I was an adult in my 30s when she finally passed from this life to the next. But by the time we were adults, and my older sister and I concur with this, She had gotten so old that it never really occurred to us that she could possibly die. As far as we were concerned, she was old from the time we were young. So why wouldn't she keep on living? But as I got older, we noticed that Mama Rachel was more fascinating beyond her years. We learned of some of her adversities and some of the graces of her life. We found out that she was an herbalist, a medicine woman of sorts, who many would come to for healing. She had, you have to understand, no degrees and no diplomas. I'm not even sure that she could read, but she had the natural inclination about how certain herbs and oils could be mixed together into a good tincture that would ease pain and suffering, or even extend one's quality of life for a while. Mama Rachel added to the quality of our lives and the quality of lives of many for generations. But as you can imagine, having lived to be 108 years old, she had seen a lot of people come and go. Those who had departed this life included her husband, who died in the great flu epidemic of 1914. So that meant that she was a widow for over 80 years. Mama Rachel knew how to protect herself, she thought, and so she developed the habit of whenever someone passed or died from this life, she would quietly take any photos that she had of them that were propped up around her and put them away, saying that it wouldn't help to dwell on death because we all, and she, needed to move forward. You see, church, it's sometimes not about staying alive, but it's about the stay in our lives. Those things that will remain and those things that will be remembered about us. But we noticed something quietly in the last year or so of her life. She got out all those old pictures. Those pictures that she had tucked away many years ago and propped them up like a cloud of witnesses around her. And when she did pass from the life as we knew it, she did so in good company, surrounded by the images of those she had loved over her long lifetime. She didn't tell us that she had started doing this, but we noticed it. And we were glad for her to be embraced by those who loved her over her long, fruitful life. I don't know if you saw the story like I saw it a couple of weeks ago. It came out in the Times around April 22nd, and it was about the passing of the world's oldest woman, oldest person. Her name was Emma Morano. She lived in Verbania, Italy, and she died on Paschal Sunday, the day between Good Friday and Easter. The Times described her age as 117 years, 137 days, 16 hours, and some minutes. I was fascinated by some of the tidbits about her life. In the drawer of her nightstand, she kept supermarket-grade anti-aging cream that she applied every night before going to sleep. I think that application and dedication to applying night cream says a lot. She loved life, and she wanted to put her best face forward, if you will. C.S. Lewis is said to have said, "You are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream. Reflecting on her life, Emma said, "I never wanted to be dominated by anyone." She told stories that as a girl she would sneak out with her sisters and go dancing, and her mother would come looking for them with a stick. She was devout and wore many rosaries around her neck. Her family members were afraid for her, fearing that she might choke to death on them in the middle of the night. She loved clocks, particularly the ones that chimed, signifying the passing of time. And she cooked for herself until she was 112 years old. The gas company sent her a certificate for being a loyal customer. But she didn't become famous until she was at the age of 110. She became famous for being old. And people would track her with every sunrise to see if she's still alive. The community was expecting word of her death daily. That word didn't come until Paschal Saturday, 2017. Church, it's sometimes not about staying alive, but it's about the stay in our lives, the ways in which we will remain in the hearts of those who love us, and how we will be remembered. Getting back to Noah. If you're not familiar with the story, if you haven't read it in a while, I would invite you to review it this week and to marvel at its intricacies and contradictions and mysteries. But I think that the sum of the story is, from my opinion, noted in three things. One, he was the only righteous man on earth, and God honored that. Two, he was told and then carried out the building of a very large boat and gathered all those animals and was set afloat on the sea, the rising flood, for 40 days and 40 nights. We've seen movies about how that experience must have been for him. And thirdly, he's remembered by his post-traumatic drunken escapade, the bender he went on after the flood had subsided and things had begun to settle, and he was living perhaps in the waste, and where he said some things I'm sure he later regretted. But I think the thing that he's most remembered for is that he was a righteous brother. And that God saw something very special in him and had an expectation, God, of Noah, even if it seemed unreasonable, that he was the one to fulfill an important task for the sake of the world. We know that God has an expectation for us too. And we need to listen for it. Much of our legacy and our call is to live as Christians in the earnest command that was given us to love God with all of who we are and to love our neighbor as ourselves. We try to do the best we can. That's a lot in itself. If we're successful in doing that, at least in part, we would have left a legacy, and we would be living a legacy. But sometimes there may be more work that God has in store for us and has carved out specifically for us. We don't know what that might be until we lean in and listen. Early part of this year, I'm approaching a significant birthday in about a year and a half. And a good friend who's the same age asked me if I had a bucket list. I looked at her and said, no, not really. But then I began to think about it. And on that bucket list, I couldn't come up with a list of places that I wanted to visit because I've been blessed to be able to go to some exotic and nearby places in my life. And I've met a lot of interesting people. But I began to think about that bucket list. Barry Gibb was quoted as saying that he had replaced his bucket list with forget about it list. That's never going to happen. I'm not going to climb Everest. Those days are past. But the things that I've identified as being on my own bucket list are really actions. One is to forgive those old grudges that might be hiding inside of me, and also to be forgiven by those who may be holding grudges against me, those I know and those I don't know. Secondly, is to trust God without reservation, even when I don't understand what's going on, and to love even the unlovable aspects of myself as well as the unlovable aspects I feel of others, knowing that they're covered by the grace of God. And thirdly, to not hold myself back because of active or latent fears that are within me. Sometimes we don't know what we fear until we're confronted by them. Recently, just last week, I was on a whitewater rafting trip with a bunch of folks, new friends, who had come from under the invitation of a host to enjoy an adventure together. My first inclination was to say, no way. There's no way I'm going to do that. I could swim, but, I don't know about swimming and white waters, and I don't know about the outdoors. He made things worse by sending a list of animals to be aware of. But I finally did decide I wanted to do this, to face it. And I went, and we had a wonderful time. The natural landscape was so dramatic that it took my breath away. I was in awe about that part of creation that I had never seen before, and the theologian in me, the Christian, the believer in me, all I could do was say, wow. And to think I was afraid to go. I was afraid because there were too many unpredictable variables. The outdoors, the water, the people, being away from New York City, particularly at a busy time in life. But I went and learned something about life, not only from the guides who assured that we would stay alive, but the company who were also there enjoying the surroundings. They gave us, the guys, a couple of tips. Their primary objective was to make sure that we stayed alive, and so of course we had the life preservers, and we were given tips about how to stay in the boat and hold on, to not take any unnecessary risks. But they said that when unpredictable waters are coming at you, you have to face it full on. You have to go into the center of the current and row. That's what Noah did. That's what Emma Morano did, and that's what Mama Rachel did, and that's what we have to do sometimes when God and life calls us to do it. We don't create our own whitewater rapids, but we can't avoid them in our lives. Sometimes it's not about staying alive, but it's to stay in our lives, what will remain after we're gone, and how we will be remembered. If I had not gone on that trip and faced my fears, I would not also have discovered a new community, at least for a few days, of persons who were wired very differently than me and saw the world very differently than the way in which I had been oriented. There were those who were more mathematically and geologically inclined and helped us, those of us who weren't so much that, to understand more fully what we were looking at as we were looking at the rocks and to experience it from another plane. While my heart would recite psalms as I looked at the wonderful formations in creation, they would explain the great geologic shifts that created conforming, non-conforming, and unconforming rock patterns from sediment and lava 55 million years ago, they said. Now that's a lot of years. That's a lot of years represented in the creation of the universe. And that's not necessarily a conflict for us of faith. As a people of faith, we are called to live in that space between the literal and the metaphorical, the miraculous and the mathematical, the in between the ancient and everlasting and the current moment. Knowing that in any moment, the fullness of life, no matter how short or momentary, may indeed be fulfilled. I hope somebody knows what I'm talking about this morning. Noah, in his faithfulness, lived his long life to the fullest, upheld by the grace of God. The world's formerly oldest woman died before Easter, but rose to new life on Easter Day, alive again, not dominated but adored by the arms of the everlasting God. This is true for us too. So Madison Avenue, let us live our lives with that hope and that assurance that God's grace is present for us in this life that we have been given, no matter how long or short, and to live with the knowledge of the assurance that because of Jesus, whom we continue to celebrate in this resurrection, this Eastertide season, has extended to us the hope and the promise that our lives will continue. Our life is eternal. And we will remember that it's not about simply staying alive, but it's to stay in our lives. And the people of God said,
Thank you, Cheryl, for those lovely and inspiring words. And I have to admit, when I first read that the name of the sermon was Staying Alive, the first thing I thought of was a Bee Gees song. And I considered using the lyrics as the call to worship, but it just didn't work. So I'm very impressed that you were able to pull that together. And also, I feel very, very young after the 600-year-old, 108-year-old, so thanks. So now we come to our offertory. So this is a chance to show your financial support and support our church and our ministries. So we'd appreciate anything you can provide, and we'd like to welcome the ushers to come forward. Thank you. Next, we'll have our communion hymn, Let Us Break Bread Together, number 425. Please remain standing.